Welcome to Living Fully, a podcast dedicated to enhancing your mental well-being. Each episode explores valuable insights and practical strategies to help you lead a more fulfilling life. I'm your host, Catherine Hertig. The idea of couples counseling is often viewed as a way to solve a problem. Your relationship is in trouble, so you go to therapy. But going for counseling with your partner can be a great tool for your relationship at many different stages. I talk with social worker Denis Sushkin, and he explains what happens during couples counseling and challenges some of the stereotypes around it. Today I'm here with Denis Sushkin. He's a counselor at Calgary Counselling Centre, and we're going to talk about couples therapy. And we're going to break down some of the misconceptions around that and what you can get out of the counseling experience. So thank you for being here today with me.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. To start out, it's been a while since you've been on the podcast. Can you just introduce yourself and tell us a bit about you and your background?
I've been with the center for 5 years. I'm a social worker.
Excellent. So you're pretty experienced in counseling couples?
Yeah, it's one of the things that I like to specialize. Yeah, couples and trauma, two things I'm most interested in.
Can you just kind of give us a bit of a rundown of the process of couples counseling and how it kind of differs from getting counseling just one-on-one?
When couples come in, they often are unsure what couples counseling is and what to expect of it. So the main difference between individual and couples counseling, I think that the client in the process is the relationship. So it's not about the individuals. It's how they interact and how they want to improve the relationship. So the typical process is that a couple comes in. There is some kind of assessment process when the therapist gets to know them, sees what's going on, and then they create a plan for achieving the goals that the couple wants to achieve.
Awesome. I've seen on TV and movies, I think we all have this idea of couples counseling that a couple goes when their relationship isn't doing well, when there's a problem, when there's something hard to get through. Would you say that that's pretty accurate? And would you say that that's a good time to go in for counseling?
I think it's pretty accurate. People do come in when there is some kind of crisis going on. I think it's true for all of us. We usually reach out for help when there is something that we experience. We go to the doctor when we experience some pain. And any doctor would usually tells us something along the line, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. And it's true with couples counseling too. So if people want to and can come in before some kind of crisis going on, I think they can be way more effective and productive with addressing the issues that will come later on.
Right, yeah. From what you've seen, what are some of the main reasons that people come in for counseling as a couple?
I think there are 3 main reasons that people come in. So some people come in more as a proactive step. They know that they are committed and they want to grow and develop their relationship, and there is no crisis going on. It's a bit of an exception from the rule usually. But also when people come in and there is some kind of conflict or crisis going on, that's also a reason that they want to grow and develop the relationship. The second reason why people come in is that they want to make some kind of big decision, move in together, maybe to have kids or not to have kids, maybe move somewhere else. So any kind of big decision can be a good reason to come in for counseling. And the third reason is people sometimes want to separate well. They want to end the relationship.
And they come in for counseling for that?
They want to make sure that they have a meaningful ending. Or sometimes the relationship doesn't end, like when people have kids, for example, in the future. It's not that the relationship is ending. The relationship is changing or transforming.
Right.
They still will be in the relationship, and they need to be able to work together as a team still. Maybe they're not romantic partners anymore.
That sounds very healthy to come in when you're going to end a relationship.
I think we put so much emphasis on the beginning of the relationship, wedding, celebration, some kind of milestone. Oh, we're getting together, but relationship end. And I think those ends deserve some care and attention too.
They come in for all these reasons. And then what is your role as a counselor?
There are usually 3 components to the therapist's role. So sometimes therapists can provide information, good information about development of a relationship, any kind of information about sexuality, for example, general information about conflict resolution. So providing information is one role that a therapist can play. Then there is a role that I usually call more of a coach when people want to develop skills to improve the relationship.
Yeah.
So there is some kind of active learning going on. And also there is more work, kind of like what people would usually call it kind of more traditional therapy work, like processing thoughts, emotions, maybe healing past traumas,
Right.
or repairing the relationship.
Are there times when, like, you've been working with a couple and they have maybe a misconception of what your role is and an expectation that isn't quite true?
Totally. Well, I think, and it's not about just couples therapy. Any kind of therapy starts with this process that, a more technical term is a role induction. But
A role induction?
yeah.
Okay.
So the idea that, because therapy is such a tailored approach, individual couples,
Yeah.
it's not a cookie cutter, like here are the 10 steps, go through them, and then things will be better.
Totally. Yeah.
So that means in the beginning, there is a process when both clients and therapists, like they clarify expectations, they set those goals. All therapists work differently. There are so many different approaches to therapy. People who count, I think, like they count up to like 1,000 different approaches.
Is there really? Wow.
Yeah. So it's kind of this idea of like, we need to sit down and clarify expectations and clarify like what's expected of you, what's expected of me is a really crucial step.
Right.
It's not something that people do before counseling. That's an active part of counseling.
Some couples come into counseling to grow and develop their relationship. What have you seen in terms of challenges that couples face when they're doing that?
Anyone who's been in a relationship knows that relationship it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's not an easy process. I think the challenge is how to grow and develop as individuals, but also as a couple together. So how can people keep the I and the we, and both can develop simultaneously in a good, effective way. I recently watched an interview with Bono from YouTube, and he had, I think, a really good quote that captures what I'm trying to say. He was talking about his marriage of 40 plus years with his wife.
Yeah.
And he said something along the lines that we didn't fall in love. We've been climbing up towards it.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
So there's the idea that kind of like it's not the falling in love that counts. It's not about the initial, but the process of growing and changing together.
It's true, yeah. And I think, that can be so tough because, you do have this common goal of, spending a life together or, building a relationship. But sometimes those individual goals, they don't always, or not necessarily goals, but just how you change as a person. Those don't always align.
Yeah, it takes a lot of deliberate action to keep them aligned. And sometimes it's about goals, but it's also I think just the visual of being on the hike. I think if you've been on a hike and think of a challenging hike and you're climbing with someone, there are a lot of things that come out during that hike, different personalities, different needs, how people deal with stress. So it just can be a really good visual. You might have a good common goal. We want to get there. We want to see that view. But the process of getting there, when I get grumpy and tired, when someone I'm hiking with is getting grumpy and tired at the same time, and how we deal with it can be, a fun part of the process of hiking.
It's really funny that the analogy of a hike came up because I remember, I adore my husband. He's amazing. And I think we have a really great relationship. But we did go on a very challenging hike once, and it did not go very well.
Yeah, I think it's not a sign that there's something wrong. It's a sign that there's something right.
Totally.
With the relationship, but it's just, normal. Best friends can go on that hike and just have the nastiest argument about how to get there. So
you had mentioned one reason that couples come in is figure out how to make bigger life decisions, having children or moving in together. Yeah, how does counseling kind of work in that process? Well,
all of those three main reasons why people come in, I think the process can be somewhat similar, but also each couple is unique, and they have and that's why kind of when people think about the process of counseling, the initial stage of assessing and making sure what are the needs, what are the things that people need to develop is crucial. But when it comes to those big decisions, sometimes it's about setting some time aside and just like being intentional about having conversations with someone who can structure it. Sometimes it's about developing skills about how to communicate better. Sometimes it's about helping each partner maybe even identify what's important to them in that decision. So there can be a lot of different things that people work on.
So when you say develop skills, what kind of skills are we talking about?
The most common ones, it's about how to communicate effectively. And when I think about communication, it's about how to reveal yourself effectively, how to talk about your own things, but also like the other side of it, how to listen effectively. And people play active roles in both. Like you play an active role in being heard, for example, and at the same time, like you can when you're listening, you play an active role in how the other person is speaking. Like kind of how you listen shapes the other person's experience too. So sometimes it's about the skill of setting boundaries. Sometimes it's the skill of how to show empathy effectively. So those are the most common skills that people work on.
Yeah, like communication and boundaries.
Communication, boundaries, empathy.
If a couple came in here and, they'd been talking about maybe moving in together, not quite sure, how do you kind of lead them through that? What kinds of questions do you prompt them with to get them thinking? What exercises do they work on?
The initial step will be kind of what is it that they want to achieve by having this kind of conversation? Because I think when I hear this, I usually think okay, so they want to talk about moving in together. And it sounds more like a means to a bigger end. And I would want to hear from them first of all and help them and make them kind of first tool, first strategy to use so what will it allow them to do?
Yeah.
Is it about actually learning how to talk together? Is it about, for example, maybe conflict resolution? Maybe it's about moving in together. It's just a small step towards bigger commitment and thinking through what kind of relationship we want to create together. For example, if it's about communication, there are a couple of different even speaker-listener exercises that people can do when people take turns talking about what's important to them. I think it's such a interesting sometimes process. We all learn how to take turns when we're kids. Yeah. But at some point, we just forget. Or there are certain contexts maybe when we forget how to take turns effectively. So a good exercise can be just okay, let's just slow down and then just take one person will take time and take the turn to actually just reveal everything that they're thinking. Maybe it will be not just an opportunity to articulate it to the other person, but even an opportunity to discover and explore yet undiscovered parts of themselves.
Yeah, because I don't know if a lot of us think that deeply about it, what's important to me in this situation. Yeah. And it's really easy to misalign sometimes because we don't think about what's important, but we always have something that's important to us. And there's almost two levels, the value or the meaning, but also how we operationalize the value of the meaning. Yeah. So, and we only see what we do without understanding the meaning behind it. Right. And it can be a really easy place where people just misunderstand each other and a conflict creates. But if you understand what's the significance of the meaning behind the actions that you see in the other person, then now I know, because we see what we see through our own eyes. Yeah, and intention it's important. Yeah. Intention and the value that it brings to the other person. Yeah, I mean, not everyone is meant to stay together, and sometimes splitting up is the best idea for a couple. So when it comes to, you phrased it, separating well, what guidance and support can couples counseling offer during this time, during this process? Yeah. So again, it's a very unique process. It will depend on the couple, but for some couples, it's just about having a meaningful ending and almost celebrate and reflect back on the relationship that they had. It's almost the chapter is ending. So let's sit down. Let's work through things. Let's notice emotions that come up,
thoughts that come up, maybe even share and resolve things that haven't been resolved yet. So there's nothing lingering. But for a lot of people, separating is not about ending the relationship, but it's about changing or transforming the relationship. Because if a couple has been, for example, together for 10 years and they have kids together, that means they will still be in a relationship, not a romantic relationship anymore, but they will have to co-parent, they will have to be there for those big events for the kids, they will have to be there for the kids' graduation, weddings, grandchildren.
And figuring out how to enter into that new version of a relationship.
Right, yeah. Some people just want to, okay, let's be there for our kids and there's nothing else. Some people want to end the romantic part of the relationship and they want to stay friends. And that's where, for example, the boundaries can be helpful.
Right, yeah.
People would be recalibrating everything.
Yeah, very different boundaries in that scenario. Have you experienced, working with a couple who, let's say they don't have children, but they come in to end the relationship?
I've had situations when they come to counseling for one thing, but then they realized, well, you know what? It's not about changing and growing together. It's time to go our own separate ways.
Right. And I don't know, I guess we tend to think of like the ending of a relationship with like negative feelings. Somebody's upset, somebody's angry. It's not always a joint decision.
Part of any kind of ending, it's almost like, and I'll take it outside of the context of the couples therapy and like this kind of like big transitions, but like when we even change jobs and you go to a job that's kind of like meaningful and you like it, the job that you're leaving, it's like there is some grief and loss and there is some sadness about the transition. So any step forward means that you're leaving something behind.
Does that idea come up in couples counseling, the idea of grief and loss?
Yeah, totally, in a lot of different contexts. Grief and loss is messy and it's not a very straightforward process. People often discover this kind of like two processes that can feel like very contradictory processes happening at the same time. Like they're moving forward and they're kind of oh, something is changing and I'm excited. And like, oh, this is really sad.
Right.
And it's like happening at the same time. And it's when you have two people, it's just like, it's inevitable that they will have two different experiences of this. It can be hard to see kind of one person is like, might be more sad than excited about the change and the other person is the opposite. And it's not that one is the better or like one person is right and the other one is not. It's just grief is a messy process.
Really switching gears. So the idea of the honeymoon stage. I think any person who's experienced a relationship, understands that. Like the first part of a relationship is very exciting and new. And what have you kind of seen in your work about that stage ending and how that changes the relationship?
Well, the reality of it is like, the end of the honeymoon stage is inevitable. So there is no way around it. And usually there are two ways how people go about this kind of change. Some people really want to hold on to this, honeymoon and this kind of like bliss, happily ever after is the idea or the goal of the relationship. I feel like the social media and all the movies are not helping with this.
No.
Usually in the movie, there is kind of challenge that the couple overcomes and then happily ever after.
I know. It kind of ends at like the wedding or like the decision to stay together or something, but then they don't show, the mundane and the everyday and like.
Yeah. It's kind of they don't show it. Or wedding and then they're old and just retiring together. And honeymoon stage is inevitable. So some people like really resist and they just like hold on to it and it just like creates more challenges. Couples often get stuck when one or both hold on to this idea of honeymoon stage and kind of like we're one and the same and let's make sure that we keep it this way. Yeah,
like I get it. I mean, that stage it's great, but you got to kind of look at it like it's a different stage. It's a different time and it's not any worse than any other. It's just you've grown.
Yeah. Resisting is one option. The other option, like people embrace this. Like, okay, so that's happening. They know that's going to happen. They embrace those moments when the first disillusionments hit. Because in a relationship, it's also kind of like, oh, it's been great. It was a bliss. And now, oh, my partner is actually can do something that's annoying. Or like, it's like, I'm a morning person and they're an evening person, and we can't find a good way to, make it work. And it becomes like, I'm more tired in the evening, and then it turns into a conflict. So, so embracing, noticing those disillusionments and working through them. So a couple can create like a space when, again, this idea of like both individuals can have a place to be.
Right.
They can be true to themselves, who they are, but also they can be close to the other person who is very different from them.
Yeah, I like to think of it like it's really nice because you've become more comfortable with that person.
But that's where kind of the conflict, the inevitability of conflict, and the crucial aspect of having a good conflict resolution skills is also important.
I know a lot of it is communication, but can you give any examples of how couples can kind of work on having that conflict in a healthy way?
It's a really important process, and it's really, I sometimes feel like it's such a cool process to help people on the journey with, because the whole idea, I think, goes back to this, like, how to get close to the other person while still being true to myself.
Right.
This person who's different from me, they have different habits, different history, different everything. They think differently. I love them, but they're different from me.
Yeah.
And the conflict resolution is kind of, there are three things here, because in any relationship, there is also the perspective of partner A, the perspective of partner B, and then the place where those two perspectives can kind of coexist together.
Mm-hmm.
So for conflict resolution, both partners need to be able to first differentiate themselves, know what they're thinking, feeling, wanting, dreaming about, be able to even articulate those things to themselves. Then they need to be able to tolerate the tension that the other person has their own thoughts, feelings, dreams, desires. And also an important step of like emotionally risking putting up your own thoughts into the relationship. Hey, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, being vulnerable.
Being vulnerable and open, but like, you know what, like when you left those dishes in the sink, it's just like I felt unsupported.
It's so funny whenever I talk to counselors about couples, that example of dirty dishes comes up every time.
You can come up with a few examples to break up. So another example can be, how people manage money.
Yeah.
Can be a good example. Like it's overall, I think like sex, death, and money are three topics that are hardest to talk about.
Totally.
Again, the conflict resolution comes when it's kind of like people can talk about those things. Both of them can feel heard and understood by the other person when they can reach this kind of like soothing moment in the conversation. Or you get me.
Right.
You might not agree with me, but you get me. When people get there, I feel like problem solving becomes like such a small thing that people don't even need much help with. Like once they understand each other and where they're coming from, when they can get to that soothing moment, often like some kind of problem solving solution comes up.
Compromise or?
Well, it can be a compromise. Sometimes it can be like, oh, now I know what it's like for you, so I'm way more kind of like relaxed. Yeah. Kind of, it doesn't have to be about compromise.
Right. If there are scenarios where, like a compromise needs to happen, like one person wants something one way, one person wants the dishes to soak, and the other wants to do them right away. In a scenario like someone's not going to get their way, how do you work with a couple to tolerate that, to work towards compromise, that kind of thing?
Well, first of all, I don't think there are a lot of topics that people that will be deal breakers. So people cannot find some kind of solution.
Right.
So it's hard for me to sure, there are probably kind of like, to have kids or not to have kids. Maybe it's kind of like there's no middle ground in there.
No.
But overall, I think it's rare to see people not be able to come to some kind of solution to. And I think the main thing is identifying what's the significance, what's the meaning, because the dishes in the sink, it can represent not being supported. Sometimes maybe not efforts not being recognized. Maybe it's about fairness. So those dishes in the sink can represent so many different things. So once people know, or it's not about the dishes, it's about support, or trust, or fairness.
Totally.
And they can reflect, who would say that the value of support, the value of fairness is not important. That's where it's kind of like how people operationalize those values is different. But once they know what they're talking about, it's much easier to give what the other person is asking for.
Yeah, like the meaning behind it.
Right.
So we've talked a lot about how it's kind of a 3-part thing with couples counseling. It's it's about the relationship, but also about each individual person. So how does couples counseling, how can it help you gain clarity about yourself?
Well, and that goes back to that idea of self-differentiation. The idea that you in the relationship, you're responsible for understanding what's happening for you, identifying what are your thoughts, feelings, desires, dreams are, being able to articulate them and even discover further. Sometimes I can have I know what's going on for me, and then once I slow down and think more, it's kind of oh no, actually this thought is connected to that and that, and this process of self-discovery can be an important part of the therapy. Then the ability to find words and articulate it to the other person, risk and tolerate this kind of risk of I'm putting this out there, and I know how to take care of myself when this is happening. It's a very individual process as well.
Yeah, so this kind of counseling, it can kind of help you figure out what's important to you. How can it kind of help you shape an idea of the kind of partner you want to be and the relationship you want to have?
Yeah, I think it's such a big question, and it's an important one of the important first steps in therapy is identifying this big picture. What kind of relationship do I want to have? And then getting to a place how can we what kind of relationship do we want to have? This can change over time.
Yeah, totally.
Relationships shift and evolve, and there are different needs, and there are different even needs for closeness, separateness. Sometimes people need to navigate and find the right balance. But then in this big picture, there's also an element what kind of partner do I want to be to make sure that this kind of big picture happens. And this is not just a one-time decision. It's a kind of you have to make this decision every single day.
Yeah.
It's similar to deciding to get on an exercise routine or learn to play an instrument.
For sure.
It's not about okay, I've decided I'm gonna run half marathon in a year. You have this big picture, but then you need to make the decision every single day when you have it's -40 outside. I don't want to go out, or I don't want to train right now. I just want to stay here. And then it's again, the next day will come with its own challenges. So it's about identifying, okay, so this is the kind of person I want to be, and this will help me to make those decisions every day.
I really like the way that you framed that, and I think not a lot of people think of it that way. What kind of a partner do I want to be to have the relationship that we want to have? I think that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it can be a bit of a cheesy phrase, it takes two to tango, but that's the kind of, I think, the practical side of it. Yeah, you kind of each one of us, we play an active role in making sure that the relationship is the kind of relationship we want to be in.
So how can a couple get the most out of the counseling experience? What advice do you have for someone that's starting the process?
Starting from making sure that both of you are on the same page, that yes, we want this, getting to the place where yes, that's the goal for us, or maybe hey, we have two different goals. Let's bring both of them to the session and let's figure out how we can make sure that we work on both of them or combine them. Then the process of finding the right therapist for themselves, because the relationship between the couple and the therapist is the main vehicle for change. We can always predict like just making sure that people start working with someone and like continuously check in, like, is this working? Is this the kind of therapy we want to have? I think the hardest piece for most couples I worked with is this idea that, oh, I need to take responsibility for my thing.
Yeah.
And make sure that I work on my side of the street. Because like when arguments happen at home, for me, like the initial kind of like thought or impulse, like, oh, well, my partner is wrong and I'm right. And she needs to work on things, not me.
Like the other person needs to change. Yeah.
So kind of this idea that if the relationship between two people is the main client in this therapy process, then it means it takes two people to make it work. It takes two people to make it dysfunctional quite often. I'm not talking about like some kind of like more extreme things like domestic violence or day-to-day conflicts, day-to-day arguments, and day-to-day misalignments between couples. It's just like, well, it takes two to make that happen. So it's hard, but coming in with the idea, oh, okay, I'll do my best to show up here and work on things that I can contribute to.
Like when that's difficult for a person in a couple, and you're seeing that in the counseling room, like, how do you communicate that? What ways do you kind of recommend a person working on taking more responsibility for themselves?
Well, sometimes, because going back to my like the role that a therapist can play. Sometimes it's about like just providing context, providing some good information about what's normal, having a good reference point for people. To kind of like to say kind of, well, it does take two people to make this relationship work or not work, and it's not in a way to like blame. Hey, it's your fault. You're responsible for this, but it's like it's like a relationship. Like I sometimes feel like it's like a serve and return. Like one person does something, I respond. They respond to my response. It's like like a conversation we're having. You're asking me a question, I'm saying something, then you're responding to something I'm saying. So both of us are playing a role to make this conversation happen. So the same thing happens in the relationship on the bigger scale. So sometimes providing like some kind of analogy. Sometimes it's about providing. Well, research shows that about 70% of all the arguments happen because there are two different individuals in the relationship. One person is an introvert, one person is an extrovert, one person is a morning person, one person is an evening person. One person leans to be more organized, one person leans more towards being a bit messy. So if that's the reality, that means it's not about making one person more like the other, but finding a kind of like a way to talk about those things, work through those things, and create like a third way for the couple. So it's not just like, or I have the answers. My partner needs to adapt and change more and become more like me. So and to make it happen, it's like you do need both people.
How can they identify the roles that they play in a relationship?
For some people, it's easier. For some people, kind of it can be harder, and that's where kind of like a third party can be helpful. Like if people get stuck and they have no way to see what's going on, so having another person who can tell you, hey, here's what I'm seeing. Like let's identify what's going on can be helpful. But overall, kind of going back to this comparison with the conversation, it can be just a little exercise that people can do. So when I do X, how does my partner respond to what I do? And then when they respond to my response, how do I respond? And just like going back and forth a little bit and just like, so it's like stepping away. So you're not seeing just the trees, but the forest as well.
Yeah.
I think like if there was a fly on the wall watching our interaction, what kind of back and forth will be visible here? So that can be a good way to just like step back and notice. And there are a couple of just like common patterns. Like there is one person would tend to like distance themselves when the conflict arises, and the other person will just like pursue them more and kind of like reach out for more, and just like it becomes like, and the more the second person just like pursues them, most likely that's another invitation to the first person to just like, I'll just stay away.
To retreat even more.
Yeah, because that's another just like natural difference. One person might want to resolve everything right there in that moment.
Yeah.
And that's just like natural tendency that they have. And the other person might have a tendency to go, well, I just need some time to think through and kind of like come up with what I want to say so it's meaningful and respectful. And sometimes those can clash.
For sure.
And it just becomes like a pattern. Doesn't matter what they're talking about. Like, again, money, parenting, in-laws, whatever it is, just like this is the same pattern. I heard once it was compared to like the couple's ability to separate the lyrics of the conflict from the music.
Yeah.
So kind of the lyrics meaning like that's the topic. That's the kind of like what goes into the kind of like the words. Music being like, there's a set structure. Verse, chorus, bridge, and you repeat. What's the dance between the two of us? What's the music that we're dancing to?
Yeah.
If they can identify that, that can be a helpful step towards, if that's happening, like how can we work towards changing this kind of pattern?
Yeah. Conceptualize it a bit more. A lot of couples counseling, it does have to do with resolving a certain conflict. How does that process help to build intimacy in a relationship?
Well, and that's another area where I sometimes need to provide context and information to people. But the inherent purpose of a conflict is to create intimacy. It's inevitable that conflict will happen, and the idea that if people can resolve it effectively. And we don't only understand each other, but we can also like create like something that will be mindful and respectful of both of our perspectives. So this is such an revealing themselves to somebody else, having the experience of like, oh, I see you, I hear you, I understand you. I also have a different perspective on this, and I can listen to that perspective too. And then when people can create something new out of it, it's a very creative and intimate process. So it's like conflict resolution of conflicts can be just like similar to building a strong bridge between two people.
That's a beautiful way to look at it. I'm gonna think about that the next time an argument comes up.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to think about. Like, I'm just building a strong bridge right now.
Yeah.
When the only thing you want to say is something not very appropriate. But yeah, it's good. I think that's the skill of like stepping back sometimes maybe, and practicing like this kind of like hating the moment, not the person, hating the disconnection that happens, but still thinking that like, well, conflict is also painful because you get disconnected from someone that you really care about.
Yeah, that's not fun.
No.
Thank you so much for chatting with me, Denis. Is there anything else that you wanted our listeners to know about couples counseling before we go?
Yeah, no, don't be afraid to reach out for help. It's totally normal. A lot of people use it as a good tool. Yeah,
that's a really good point. It is very, very normal.
Yeah.
Conflict is inevitable. If you're with someone long enough, you're going to butt heads about something at some point. So.
And some people like it's not only about conflict, but some people are great about at like just growing on their own, and they can just like organize themselves and set things aside and set goals and go through the process of like learning and growing. And some people just need some extra help on that journey too. So if people want to just like develop and grow their relationship, sometimes it's totally fine to get the help that they need.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Right. Thank you.
Sure. You're welcome.
You've been listening to Living Fully, a Calgary Counseling Centre podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We want to thank you so much for listening to Living Fully this year. We're taking a little break for the summer, but we'll be back with new episodes starting September 3rd. This episode was produced by Nick Here, Gus Hunt, Louisa Campos, Jenna Forbes, and by me, Catherine Hertig. A special thanks to Denis Sushkin. To stay up to date on our latest episodes, be sure to subscribe. We're available in your favorite podcast app. Living Fully is a production of Calgary Counseling Centre and recorded in Calgary on Treaty 7 territory. Living Fully podcast is not a substitute or alternative for professional care or treatment. Calgary Counseling Centre and Counselling Alberta provide effective counselling for anyone in Alberta with no waitlist and no financial barriers. Find us online at calgarycounseling.com or counselingalberta.com. For help across Canada and the United States, call 211. If you are outside of Canada and the US, seek help from your general medical practitioner.